Hey guys, I just wanted to make this video because I really regret not thinking to film the installation of the Nibbi Carb and why I changed it out. And it's basically the same reason as everybody else, but I was hoping I could just use that and be done with it and not have to change it. But as you probably know, and I want to thank Mike Festiva too for the detailed videos that he put out on the Storm and the Templar. Very great job on that, Mike. I trust your judgment, and your ideas, they work for me too. So I just want to thank you for that, for the time it took to do that. As Mike showed you, the bottom of the stock carb has screws that are peened over. I could cut them, put a slot in them, take them out, but since the jets aren't standard anyway and they use like an adapter, I'm not even going to bother with it. I was just hoping it was going to work, but it does work, but it just doesn't run as well as it should. And for the life of me, I don't understand why the manufacturer, which by the way isn't X Pro, X Pro is a distributor, the manufacturer is Zuumav, Z-U-U-M-A-V. Why would you put this carb on with all this quality going on here and all the stuff that they put on this bike and the attention to detail? Why would you put this thing on here when you can get knockoff Key and carbs for $35? Even if it was that, it would still be better than this because you could at least open the thing up and it uses standard jets. So I really don't get why they would even bother. This, in my opinion, it cheapens the whole thing. Like, it is a great deal, and I'm not complaining about like anything on the bike. Yes, it has quirks here and there, but they can be easily fixed. And the value of these bikes is so good. But why put this piece of junk on there when there's every carb on the planet practically does not have these peened over screws and has standard jets? It makes no sense to put this on it, especially when you got the rest of this package here where the quality is pretty impressive actually, especially for 900 bucks. And by the way, I would recommend that if you are going to buy one of these bikes, it's actually quite a bit cheaper than if you buy it directly from what is it, X Pro Power Sports. I'll put the link in the description, rather than Amazon, because on Amazon you do have to pay sales tax and it's $100 more to ship it. At least it is to the East Coast. I'm in Rhode Island and it actually arrived a day early. I think it was 5 days that it got here, which is pretty impressive. And the other thing too is the company that it comes from, the Power Sports company, I think they're located in California, but they ship out of Texas. They use a standard freight company. I think it's R&L Freight. And there was zero damage to this crate and zero damage to the bike through that whole shipping process. And the reason why, I think, is because this company uses the same freight shipping company every single time, and they have an agreement with them. And so not only is it $100 cheaper if you don't buy it on Amazon, you buy it from this company, but you don't pay sales tax. It's hard to beat that, you know. And like I said, it came in the crate, steel frame crate with the box on top of it. It was well wrapped, padded, everything was great. So there was a few things that were messed up on the bike that has nothing to do with shipping. I'll go over that, I guess, on this too. But I did make a previous video that's a lot longer than this video is going to be, explaining some of the anomalies that I did run into. Like the front wheel wasn't trued up, and I didn't notice it till I rode it for 4 days because I checked them initially and it seemed fine until I felt a huge clunk one time when I was going into like a corner at speed, and I think just the sheer G-forces and the rotating mass of the wheel because the spokes weren't snugged up, it kind of shifted the hub a little bit and smacked into the bottom of the fork legs. Initially I thought they were just banged up, but I think I might have a surface crack on it. And that definitely wouldn't have happened if the wheel was trued up. I did send a video to the company to show them the damage and explain everything, just like I did with the there was a missing bolt on the rotor, front rotor, brake rotor. I sent them a video of that, and I also told them that my bike came through with no spacer between the intake module, intake manifold on the carburetor. So there's a little spacer that goes on right here. In fact, it looks very similar to this spacer right there, the black spacer there between the carburetor itself and the intake manifold tube. Mine didn't come with that. I thought that's why it was running weird, because I thought there was an air leak there, but it turned out it didn't improve when I got it. My point is that the company actually sent me, instead of the hardware only, they sent me the whole disc rotor and the hardware. That was impressive. And they sent me the replacement intake manifold gasket and spacer. I mean, that's amazing. And I did send them the video on the damaged lowers. I can't really show you a good view of that now because the wheel's on, but if you look at the other video that I made about the anomalies and stuff, actually I made a video specifically of that. It's only a minute long, but they asked me to send it to them just to clarify what the deal was. So I don't know what they're going to do with it yet. Anyway, back to the carburetor. I changed the carb to the Nibbi. It's the same size, a 26 millimeter, I believe, or 27. No, it's 26. The stock one is 27. Yes. The reason why I did that is because with the slightly smaller diameter of the throat, you'll end up with a little bit more torque. And that's much more important to me than top end. Especially since I changed the gearing, which there's another video that I made on the gearing. I put a 15-tooth countershaft sprocket instead of the 14 that's on it, because first gear is a crawler. It's actually too low, especially if you're trying to teach other people how to ride. It's too jumpy. So by upping the countershaft one tooth, the countershaft sprocket one tooth, it made a big difference in smoothing first gear out. Okay, so on the carb, it's a 26 millimeter, but the intake throat is much bigger, and it requires a larger air filter. So I just bought the Nibbi one that's designed for it. The choke is more like a typical Kian choke. It's got the plunger type, and I like that one. It's a little bit more difficult to get to than the stock one, because the stock one had a big lever, but I have to say the thing runs much better. It doesn't backfire anymore, and I jetted it. I changed the jetting. I actually wrote it down. So the stock jetting on the stock carb is the pilot jet's a 45 and the main's a 95. On the Nibbi, the stock pilot is a 40, and the stock main jet is 115. I left the pilot jet in and I changed the 115 to a 110, but it comes with a 112, a 110, a 118, and a 115. And this seems to work for roughly 450 feet above sea level. So that's the combo I'm using on the Nibbi. 40 for pilot, 110 for stock, for main. And it works great. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to also make a suspension video, which I'm working on the editing right now. I also sent a video to X Pro. Let me put this back in the. I sent a video back to X Pro. Jeez. To show them how slow the rebound was on the suspension. And it has been a real challenge to get any information on the shock. It's made by Zuumav, it's branded Zuumav. It's actually pretty good quality. It's just a non-adjustable shock. And what I mean by non-adjustable is that it's preload only. That's not considered adjustable. A real adjustable shock would have compression rebound adjustment, and the higher end ones would actually have high and low speed compression. This one only has preload. Now, the preload is really designed to allow you to set the static sag and the rider sag on the shock. It really doesn't stiffen anything up. All it does is add additional preload onto the shock so it sits right during riding and when nobody's on the bike, meaning static sag. So it's very difficult to get anything out of them because the manufacturer, or I should say the distributor, X Pro, doesn't really know what the stock spring rate is because they don't print it on the spring. I don't understand why you wouldn't do that, but it turns out that most of the shocks made for the Chinese bikes don't have any indication as to what the spring rate is. So there's only really one way to figure out the spring rate if they can't tell me what it is, and that's to make a jig and make it so that I can put the shock in the jig with a jack and a scale under the jack and make it so that I can figure out the spring rate. And if you move the spring 1 inch, the weight that it takes to push that spring down 1 inch is the spring rate. I have no clue what this shock is right now. My point is that I can't achieve, with my body weight of 135, 137 pounds, I can't achieve the 4 inches or 100 millimeters of rider sag. The shock spring is a tad too stiff. So I'll try to do a follow-up video once the manufacturer and distribution company X Pro gets back to me on this, because I have to fix this one way or the other, because the slow rebound is so slow that the bike packs up. Packing up means that when the bike compresses to hit a bump, it doesn't rebound quick enough, so the next bump the bike is still in the compressed state, and it basically just makes the rear wheel hop off the terrain. And if you're in any kind of lean angle, the bike is you're gonna lose it. You know, I've done that once already, and it's pretty sketchy. On the front end, I did do a modification which I will be posting a video soon on. I took the fork legs off, and I wanted to see, without messing with the valving, I just wanted to see if I swapped the factory fork oil out with ATF oil, if it would make a difference. And it actually did. Made a big difference. I don't have an A/B comparison here for you, but I will show you that. Let's see if I can show you this. Just bear with me here. I wasn't really planning on going this far with this video, but the fork, now that the ATF oil is in here, it is much faster on the rebound. And I put less oil in the fork. I think I ran it at 152 millimeters from the top of the fork tube. That's with the springs out and the fork fully compressed. And the action of the fork is much better. Now, I'm not trying to make it like my race bike. I'm just trying to improve it to the point where, in my opinion, it should come this way from the factory. The rear end, I don't know how well you can see this, but that is far too slow. When you're hitting bumps, that thing, it just does not rebound quick enough, and it causes the bike to kind of hop, like I said, over bumps. And honestly, if they can valve it the way it is now, they can valve it a little bit quicker. And there is no way, I don't care if you weigh 200 pounds, the rebound is still going to be too slow, because the rebound and spring rates are two completely different things. Here's the thing. I found this shock an exact replica or replacement for this shock, but it comes with 1,000-pound spring rate. I mean, ridiculous. The eye-to-eye length of the shock from the center bolt of the mounting points is 320 millimeters, which ends up being 12.5 inches. There's very few shocks that are that long, for pit bikes anyway. But the company who makes it, actually, it's not made by Zuma, the one I'm thinking about. It's made by DNM, and it is the same length, but it comes only with 1,000-pound spring. But it does have rebound adjustments on the bottom. Problem is if you put that shock in this bike, that spring rate is way too much. And even with adjustable rebound, because even if you put this spring on that shock, it's still going to be a problem, because that valving on the shock, the DNM, is going to be set up for 1,000-pound spring, not whatever this is. I'm just guessing it's probably 250. I don't know. But I need to get this information in order to fix these problems. And I'm telling you guys, I realize that most of the people who are buying pit bikes probably don't have any knowledge of suspension and how important it is, but it is vital in the performance of the bike. It makes all the difference in the world. And every single bike I've ever owned have all been full-size bikes, and they've always had to have suspension work done because I'm light. So I know what good suspension feels like. And even though this isn't on par with, say, a race bike, you know, with Kayaba suspension or Showa or whatever, the European WP suspension, it's not quite to that level. Even though it's not adjustable in terms of preload and compression, there is no excuse for having the rebound this slow. Because if you can valve it this slow, you can valve it faster. And you want to have quality dampening, but not so much where it's aggressive like this. And we're not talking a lot. I think an oil change on this shock would be enough, like ATF oil. Problem is, let me zoom in and show you this. Most shocks have nitrogen in it. They're filled with nitrogen because that's what forms the pressure, and it's nitrogen because it's a stable gas. And if they would use air, as the shock gets used in the course of a ride, that heat, the heat from the shock would build up more pressure in the air, and you'd end up with an inconsistent shock. So that's why they use nitrogen. Well, most shocks have a Schrader valve, very similar to the Schrader valve on a wheel. Same exact thing, actually. Well, all these Chinese shocks don't have that. They got some kind of a, see if I can, the lighting's terrible. These things have an Allen screw with a lock nut on it. So if this shock was to be taken apart, I don't know if I'd be able to rebuild it, because there's no valve, but I'm thinking maybe the valve should be right where this is. Now I'm going to show you the suspension, the Kayaba fork, shock rather. This is a Kayaba shock for the Kawasaki KDX 220. And you can see there's a Schrader valve at the bottom. And that's where the nitrogen is put in. You'll also notice that it's titanium nitrate coated, and the reason why they do that is to stop the oil from getting contaminated by the raw aluminum. Now, I am not interested or worried about that on this type of bike. I just want the rebound speeded up a bit. So in the next week or two, I am going to get a solution to this problem. Now, I don't know if you guys have noticed, or if you're sensitive enough to understand the difference between a bike that's set up specifically for you. But from what I'm seeing, the community of pit bike riders, even the racers, I don't think they have a full understanding as to how much better the bike could be if it was set up not only for your weight, but if the suspension was adjustable, like compression, rebound, spring rate, oil, viscosity, all that stuff matters. It makes a huge difference in the performance. It's the difference between you being able to fly in the woods and have the bike be super predictable and allow you to gain confidence in that bike and you knowing what it's going to do versus what this bike does right now. Even though the front end is much better, this bike, like I said, when you hit a bump, it's so slow on the rebound that the next bump, it just packs up and the bike starts kind of like bouncing because the wheel isn't making contact with the ground because the suspension's too slow. I'm going to get a solution to this problem, whether I have to do it myself or find another shock. I don't want to split hairs on this bike, but this is a very obvious fix for me, and it is something I noticed right away. I've never ridden a bike that was as sketchy feeling when I hit a bump when I first started riding it, before I modified the fork and noticed why it felt like that, which is the slow rebound on the shock. I was like, what the hell is going on here? You know, so I am going to fix this problem. I also spoke with a distributor today. They specialize in replacement parts for Chinese bikes. Everything from suspension to wheels to seats, everything. Carburetors, motors, everything. I spoke with the receptionist for about 15 minutes and I explained the situation about the shock and the lack of attention to detail on most of the Chinese bikes, and they're like 90% there. It's just the extra 10%. I think nobody is explaining to the manufacturers how important this small stuff is and what a huge difference it would make in the ride quality. And I don't mean comfort necessarily, although it would be much more comfortable. It's the quality of what you can do on the bike when the bike is actually set up for you. Like when we have our suspension set up on the race bikes, I feel invincible. Like I'll go through anything on that bike. This bike gives me massive apprehensive feelings about going through just the smallest embedded rock, just a small little baby head type of rock sticking out just a little bit. When you hit that with the rear end, the bike just hops because, like I said, the suspension's too slow. So I just want to resolve the problem, and I think a lot of people would really benefit from having a suspension system that was more adjustable. Even if it wasn't adjustable in terms of compression and rebound, if they're going to valve it at the factory, you're going to valve it to the point where it's going to be acceptable. And right now the rebound is too slow, and to me it's not acceptable because I know what it could be like, and it's not like that. And by adjusting the suspension, changing out the oil in the fork, and I'll try to link you with a link in the description to that video of me pulling apart the fork. Unfortunately, the battery died twice in the middle of that video series when I was making it. So I'm going to edit and get as much into one video as I possibly can to show you. But it was really nothing. The top bolt, nut rather, on the top of the fork, this is a 40 millimeter. The nut on the inside, I believe, is a 17. And it was fairly straightforward to take apart. The dampening rods were easy to work with. The springs came right out, no problem. I ended up buying this this adjustable wrench, Duratec wrench off of Amazon, which works great for this. Good stuff. Fits very well. It does a good job. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on the carburetor swap and why I did the carburetor change and the suspension mods, but that is really for another video. I just wanted to touch on that. The shock, the problems that I did have with the front wheel not being trued. I did just purchase a Tusk truing stand, so that's going to be a thing of the past. I got to true up all these wheels here for the other bikes. And I'm going to true up both of these wheels. I did go through and tighten up these in the pattern appropriately, getting this thing a lot better than it was. But it does still have a little bit of a wobble, and I think I can get most of that out. All the modifications is I cut the plate bracket because I have no need for it. The bike's not going to see road use. I did switch out the chain, as I mentioned in the other videos, to an RK because the factory chain I know is going to stretch really bad. What else? The brake pads, they work decent, but maybe it's because I'm used to much bigger rotors. Like on these bikes have much bigger rotors. The braking power is amazing on those bikes. And the braking power, you could grab a handful of brake lever or a foot pedal and the bike won't skid unless you really, really slam it. Whereas this one tends to do that because the rotors are smaller. But the brake pads might be better if I replaced them with a name brand. I don't know. But I'll try to keep tabs on that stuff. I guess that's about it. Everything else has been really, really good on it. I did put hand guards on it because I figured I would be teaching new riders to ride this bike, and I just didn't want the levers broken. The factory grips are great, by the way. No need to change them. They feel really nice. They're gummy, soft. Did have to modify the hand guards because they're not really designed to fit on bars quite this small, but I just drilled new holes. I think Mike Festiva did the same thing. I think he rounded them off, though. I actually cut them on the bike with a reciprocating saw, so I'll probably take a file to it and neaten it up a little bit. I did not change the battery yet, and the battery is definitely not that good. It kind of hesitates on startup. Let's see if I can show that. That was all right. It was alright that time, but it normally hesitates before it starts cranking. The other thing I had to do is aim this headlight. I know that Mike did a spacer or something over here and pushed the top of the light forward. I did the opposite. I put a spacer in, a white spacer. Let's see if you can see that in there. See it? That white spacer is necessary to aim it properly. But the other thing that Mike didn't mention, I think that would help you guys, is if you had to re-aim this, loosen this this middle screw on each side of the headlight. That allows it to pivot much more. When that screw is tight, the whole frame doesn't want to pivot. But adding that spacer right here, right underneath here, made all the difference, and it is aimed properly. And there's almost no difference between high and low beam. The low beam is plenty bright enough, though, for most applications. But when you switch the high beam on, there's not a huge difference in where the beam is versus the low beam. So I leave it on high beam, and I turn the lights on only when I'm riding at night, because I'm riding off-road, not on-road. So anyway, this video is probably way too long as it is, so let's put an end to this, and I'll keep you guys up to date on the suspension changes and the other things that I submitted to X Pro to see what they have to say about the shock, the lowers on the fork legs, and a few of the other things. Alright guys, thanks.